The gravity of the time is such that every new avenue of peace, no matter how dimly discernible, should be explored. Never before in history has so much hope for so many people been gathered together in a single organization. You will provide a great share of the wisdom, of the courage, and the faith which can bring to this world lasting peace for all nations and happiness and well-being for all men.
So we are here today with Sama Bilbao in León, who's the Director General of the World Nuclear Association, a good friend, and I just can't wait to have you on Titans of Nuclear. So welcome to the show.
Wow, it is my pleasure. I mean, it's been how many years since we have talked about this? I don't even know.
So long, and you've jumped all over the world. And for anyone who doesn't know you, I just want to start off with the introduction that you're probably the most liked person in the entire nuclear industry. Everyone I have ever met only has the most positive things to say about you across the entire industry.
Well, that's great to know. Thank you. Wow. You just made my day. Thank you.
Okay, so now that we're done with that introduction, I'd love to take the opportunity just to learn a little bit about you. Can you tell us where you grew up, what your upbringing was like?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Spain, as you can obviously hear in my accent. And so I was born in Bilbao in the north of Spain, but my parents moved to Madrid when we were very small. So I grew up in Madrid, really. And normal childhood, but my father is an engineer, my mom is a fashion designer, so quite different sides of the equation there. So I grew up to be an engineer, and my sister grew up to be a fashion designer. So so we have that side. So I went to school in Madrid. I got my degree in the equivalent to mechanical engineering in energy technologies. So we learn about all energy technologies, of course, and I fell in love with nuclear energy. And I did my final project on nuclear engineering, and then I had this crazy opportunity to go to the US to pursue a PhD. So I just jumped at it. So I moved from warm Madrid to frigid Madison, Wisconsin. And I had the fabulous opportunity to do my PhD in nuclear engineering under the supervision of Professor Corradini, who is God when it comes to thermohydraulics. I mean, not only he is fabulous, but I mean, as a professor, as a mentor, but really he's just incredible, and he's the person that has instilled in me this desire to learn about everything. He's always curious, and I think he instilled on me and all the other students this curiosity about everything. So yeah, so I just went to Virginia, I mean to Wisconsin, and I got my PhD. So that's my career. So you want me to stop there, or you?
So you glossed over a little bit there. I want to learn first how you narrowed in from just general engineering studies and energy studies into nuclear. Where did that passion come from? What did you see about the space that drew your attention?
Right. Well, so I was decided to focus on energy. So in my school in Madrid, there was a specialty that was energy technologies. And I always knew I wanted to do energy technologies. So basically, they walk you through everything, wind, solar, coal, natural gas, geothermal, whatever, nuclear, of course, nuclear fission and nuclear fusion. And just learning about everything. Certainly, nuclear fission seemed what I really wanted to do. I thought it had all the pros, or most of the pros, and very few of the cons, and I saw great future. So that's why I went for it.
Spain had nuclear power, correct? Did you have any familiarity with how nuclear was built into the fabric of your surrounding infrastructure?
Yeah. So Spain has had for the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years, about 20, 25. I mean, it depends on the year, right? But about 20, 25% of our electricity comes from nuclear. So I mean, I think right now we are down to 7 units, but I mean, nuclear has been a strong part of the energy fabric in Spain. And frankly, I'm going to brag for a second, but Spanish nuclear engineers are well known around the world. I mean, there are Spanish companies that are very well known in the nuclear sector overall. So you know, I have seen Spanish fellow engineers here and there in my career. So yeah, no, definitely nuclear was something that I was aware. I didn't really decided to go for it from the beginning. Just only when I learned more about it in school is when I said, oh, this is it. This is what I want to do.
And did you have any sense of the wider perception of nuclear in culture when you started telling your friends and family, hey, I want to dive into nuclear? Were they excited? Were they nervous? What was the general feeling about this?
Yeah, no, as well, I think that's probably not very different for everybody else. No, everybody, when you tell them, yeah, I'm a nuclear engineer, or I am studying nuclear engineering, there is two things that they tell you, right? It's like, oh, you must be very smart and you must be very evil. So, so, so that's the two things that they tell you. So I mean, and it's always the same. Whenever you go, I mean, you're having a coffee with a colleague or you're talking to anybody, everybody, there is always this relatively not very positive conversation. Oh, what about the waste? Oh, I can't believe you can support nuclear, is so unsafe. Or, you know, there is these conversations, but you know, I mean, maybe because of that, I've always been so proactive and so willing to say, okay, wait, let me walk you through it. Let me tell you why I'm doing what I'm doing. I am neither as smart as you think I am, and certainly not as evil as you think I am.
Now, something I've noticed about you in the years that I've known you is you do have this this extra like superpower. In addition to your engineering capabilities, you have this communication ability that's quite frankly unparalleled. Where does that come from? Did you just practice that over the years, or did you have some formal training?
No, I've never had any formal training. I just, maybe I'm a Spaniard. I like to talk. so so maybe that's what it is. No, I really enjoy speaking about nuclear, and you know, this is part of the reason, and maybe we'll go about it later. When I had the opportunity to teach, every once in a while, where you are able to explain what you are doing, why you are doing it, why it is important, and then you see every once in a while this eye in the spark in the eye of the person that you are talking to. Suddenly, it's like it just makes my day. So I really love to do that.
Amazing. So you moved to Frigid, Wisconsin, and you started studying thermal hydraulics. What was your focus there? Was there a specific system that you looked into as part of your thesis?
Yeah. So I guess the focus on thermohydraulics was because of my advisor, Professor Corradini, who does what he does. So I was doing on something that was very specific at the time. So Professor Corradini was quite focused on molten corium concrete interactions. So basically, my work was, so I was started doing some computational work using Melcore, using Corcon, which are two computer codes that are looking at they are big system codes that look at overall nuclear safety analysis. And they both, one of the things that is notable about them is that they look at the once that the core melts down, it actually looks at the corium concrete interaction. So basically the molten core with the substrate of concrete that you have in the unit. So we were looking at that. So I started doing computational work, but then Professor Corradini insisted that I really needed to do some experimental work. So we set up some experimental study. We really wanted to understand the heat transfer correlations when you have this multi-phase mixture, you know, when you have the corium, which is really a two-phase mixture, is a slurry. And then you have the concrete that is melting with all these gases that are being produced as the corium melts down. So we were trying to understand what is the heat transfer correlation in that mixture. So obviously we didn't use real materials. We were looking at simulants. And in the end, that was my work for my thesis. We came up with a few correlations, and we were able to benchmark them against existing data, and then of course the new data that we achieved.
And how do you run an experiment? Because to me, it seems like the hardest part is that in the case of an actual meltdown, you've got this material that's producing heat itself. And so that, and continuing to produce heat. So that would have some effect on the material over time. That would be very different than if, let's say, I just poured a bucket of hot steel onto a surface and then it immediately starts cooling down and doesn't add any additional heat.
Exactly.
So how do you rectify this?
Yeah, that was one of the challenges, because as you said, so clearly this corium has this volumetric heating. I mean, so not only is as you said, is ongoing, but it's volumetric, which is very important. It's not surface heating, it's volumetric heating. So in our case, I mean, as I say, we use simulants. So we actually have electric heating. So we have these electric wires going through our simulant material. And obviously it wasn't 100% real volumetric heating, but yes, we did.
What kind of wires are these? Just like really thick tungsten or something? Like what can withstand the heat?
Yeah. So they are they are actually very thin tungsten that we had, and yeah. So it was electric heating. Yeah.
Are there any other things that you learned from the experiment? I mean, do the different materials, do they stratify out, or do they mix in? And
oh my gosh! No, it was quite a quite complex experiment, because as I said, it was three phases, right? So we have the liquid, we have the solid materials that we were simulating, plus of course the gas. And yes, we did see some stratification, which we weren't quite sure that really was happening in the real case. In the real case, we weren't truly sure that the stratification was going to be so clear. So we were playing with different flow rates for the gas that was being generated. And we were trying to look with the buoyancy of the different materials, basically the difference in density between the liquid and the solid materials that were being created. So yeah, it was quite complex. And I mean, I think that we came up with good correlations, but clearly, for example, you know that Argonne National Lab, there is a group of scientists that are doing experiments there that are actually using prototypical materials. So obviously we really try to benchmark to those, because those are the most one of the best set of data that we have for this type of experiments.
And sorry, one more question on this, just because I'm personally fascinated by this particular line of study, and then we can go on with the rest of your story.
No worries.
Are there any real life examples, like 3 Mile Island, or anything that we can like look at the final result and then like scrape off layers and just kind of see where things might have ended up? Have we done that with any real life meltdowns?
So I think that there is a lot of data from 3 Mile Island, and I'm sure that we will be able to see some data from Fukushima in the future. I mean, I don't know to which extent there was an interaction between the corium and the concrete in 3 Mile Island. So I never had any data for that. I think that if there was any, it was very much minimum. I suspect that from Fukushima, we may get more data. And the only thing is, of course, what I was looking was specifically at the heat transfer in that kind of moving, right, interface between the corium and the concrete. So I would really love to see what data do they get, whether they are usable for the type of heat transfer correlation that I came up with, or for the work that other people are doing. And let me just say, as far as real data, or maybe more usable data, I've seen that there are, I mean, and we did look at this when we were doing the experiments in the area of volcanology. I mean, so when they are looking at how the magma advances,
volcanoes.
clearly, Volcanoes, exactly. So how the magma advances and the interactions between this molten or yeah, molten magma and whatever rocks or substrate that is heating and how that works. So there are some data there. I mean, clearly the configuration is not the same, but there were some things that we looked at this as we were looking at our literature review and potential applications of what we were learning.
Amazing. Okay, so enough of that. We can come back to that on some other conversation. But where did your career go from there after you got your PhD?
Well, so then afterwards, I mean, I stayed at Wisconsin for a little while as a postdoc because I was having a lot of fun over there, of course. I mean, you know, I guess I was what my mom calls eternal student. It's like, okay, yes, stop, get a job. So eventually, maybe after a year or so after graduating, I got a job, and I was super lucky because I was able to move to Virginia, another of my most favorite places, to work for the Dominion Energy. I mean, they are called Dominion Energy right now. I used to be Dominion Generation. And they offered me this fabulous opportunity to work in their nuclear safety group. And they actually gave me this challenge to develop methodologies for the heat flux, the critical heat flux correlations that we were using for our fuel. So essentially, what Dominion wanted to do was to have the ability to switch fuel relatively quickly. I mean, to go from one fuel supplier to another fuel supplier relatively quickly. And of course that, I mean, relatively quickly, maybe 3 years. You know that the regulatory process is not very, very short. But we wanted to get in-house the ability to perform all the safety analysis for this fuel, which means to create all the software, basically computer codes that would do this analysis. So I was working with Viper.
And this is because the historical context is that this was within the domain of the fuel vendor for a very long time. The fuel vendor was the one performing the analysis, the calculations, helping submit to the NRC, and it was not within the domain of the utility. But
exactly.
That means that the utility was dependent on a single fuel vendor and didn't have the analytical tools in-house to be able to perform the analysis, which would allow them to switch vendors, thus applying competitive pressure to drive the cost of fuel down.
You got it. I mean, and you know what I would say? So Dominion is one, I mean, it continues to be one of the few, I think there may be another one, utilities in the US that actually have in-house capabilities for doing all the nuclear safety analysis. So most of it, I think maybe not the local analysis, but everything else, yes. So this, I mean, having this additional capability, as you said, would be incredibly positive because they would allow to negotiate with more strength with the fuel providers, because typically, as you said, this service was bundled with the purchase of the fuel.
Great. So I know you've been to so many other places as well. What was next for you? Did you stay in Virginia to work at VCU, or was there another part of it?
No, actually I left. So when we just started, so you know, the VCU program was one of those things that when I was at Dominion, we had a huge problem keeping talented new engineers. So we were very good at recruiting new engineers. I mean, people had heard of Dominion and people came from many of the very best schools. But you know how it is. I mean, after a few years, you get married, you have children, and people needed to go back home or move elsewhere to family and support. So we were having a very hard time. So one day, maybe having a beer with my boss and other colleagues, we were like, you know, we just really need to start a nuclear engineering program in Richmond. We just need to go to VCU and convince them that they need to start a nuclear engineering program. And this is when my boss, which was Kerry Deisher from Dominion at the time, told me, you know what, Sama, tomorrow you go and convince them. It's like, okay. So that's what we did
for the nuclear industry.
Well, you know, so I have to say, I've always been super lucky with my supervisors, my managers, my mentors. because they've been quite open-minded to crazy ideas. So this crazy idea, not only he embraced it and he let us do it, but he fully supported it.
Awesome.
So yeah, so we started that. I mean, obviously BCU started the program, but it was with the support and with the advice of Dominion. So that's what we did. And then so when we were just started this, I mean, I actually taught the first class together with Jim Kelly, which was a professor from the University of Virginia who was fabulous. Then I got the opportunity to go to the International Atomic Energy Agency. So I was able to get a leave of absence for a few years to go to Vienna and work for the International Atomic Energy Agency.
And what did you do there at the IAEA?
So at the IAEA, I was the unit head for what was called the technology development for water-cooled reactors. So I had a very small team of incredible analysts. So we were working on everything related to water-cooled reactors. So that was obviously light water-cooled reactors, but also heavy water-cooled reactors. And also, fuel, I mean, basically the entire fuel cycle, anything that was related to water-cooled reactors. So, but it was specifically technology development. So we were looking at advanced technologies. At that time, we were already looking at supercritical water-cooled reactors. We had a lot of work in that area. We were starting to look at small modular reactors, the light water-cooled reactors that were small modular reactors. So no, it was fascinating, and it opened my eyes to this whole concept of working with governments and having the expertise of all these different organizations and all these different governments. So it was a very fantastic experience.
And what was the IEA's goal, other than just research and maybe kind of dissemination of their learnings? When they form a unit to look into a set of technologies, what do they want to see accomplished in the real world?
Right. Well, so I think that obviously right now, I think that Rafael has much more proactive and visionary look about the role of the International Atomic Energy Agency in disseminating and advocating for nuclear energy. So at the time, I'm not sure that we were as proactive, but the idea was to have at hand the best information about all these advanced technologies for all those countries that wanted to use them.
I see. So this is to help newcomer countries specifically.
Well, so in this case, it was not specifically newcomers. So newcomer countries was one of the, wasn't specifically in our section, but we did work with newcomers quite a bit. Basically, try to provide them all the information. But because I was in developing technology development, so it was a little bit looking further than what is available right now. So in our case, probably what we were producing was most useful to countries that were already using nuclear. So basically, what are the next more efficient ways to build nuclear power plants. So at the time we started to look at, this modular construction, standardization, and all these new technologies to streamline the construction of nuclear. Or we were looking at what is the decision making that a country needs to have in order to choose this of that technology. I mean, how to choose between technology X or technology Y, what are the criteria that a country needs to use and things like that. So it was a little bit more advanced.
And who are the recipients of this information? Is it typically the governments themselves, or is it utilities within the countries? Who is most engaged?
Well, with us, we were most engaged with governments and with often with research organizations or maybe R&D related organizations in the governments. So depending on the country, sometimes those are very closely linked. So in some countries you have utilities or suppliers or research organizations that are very closely linked. So like, for example, if you look at Argentina, you see that the entire nuclear industry in the nuclear sector is very tightly linked. But in some other countries, it really was directly just the research organizations, and then they would disseminate this information maybe more themselves.
What's it like? What was it like moving from, from home to the U.S., then from U.S. to Vienna, and then I know you had a couple more tours. How do you see just how does that fit into your life?
I'm an adventurer. I love to learn new things all the time. I mean, I'm very curious about things. So moving to Wisconsin was a fabulous adventure, and I loved it. Moving to Virginia was great. I love Virginia. And then Vienna, I have to tell you, Vienna was one of the places that enjoy the most. I mean, living in Vienna is great because in reality it's teeny tiny. I mean, I don't know, you know Vienna.
Yeah.
It's a very small place, but it has everything, and it is so well located that you can really explore everywhere in Europe from Vienna. So I love Vienna. So then, I love Paris. The couple of years that we were in Paris before I came to London. And London, I've been here for 6 months, and I think I'm gonna love it. Of course,
But you don't know what it's like yet because everyone's been locked up.
exactly. I've been in lockdown, so I know my neighborhood not very well. Basically, the walk that we do with the dogs, that's all I really know. So, but I look forward to getting to know London. I mean, and the thing though is I'm super lucky that my husband is also a very flexible and very adventurous person. So whenever I say, you know what, there is this opportunity, what do you think? Oh yeah, let's do it. So so that's a good thing.
Let's touch upon your time in Paris, and then I want to move on to what your goals are right now at your current organization. But I don't want to leave out the MEA either.
So I moved to Paris a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago. I was there the division head for nuclear technology development and economics, and I will tell you that that was the description of that job was just like, oh my gosh, have I died and gone to heaven? This is exactly what I want to do. Because, obviously everybody knows the OECD Nuclear Energy Agency. I mean, it has a incredible reputation when it comes to everything related to the nuclear sector and the nuclear fuel cycle and nuclear energy. And I thought that given the time to be in that particular point, I mean, at the nexus of technology, innovation, economics, policy, it was like perfect because I think that, well, frankly, because I think that's where we need to be working right now. I mean, there is a lot of things in nuclear that we already know how to do them. And the things that we really need to move the needle a little bit more is exactly there is innovation, economic technology, how that fits together and how that translates into suitable policies to advance nuclear. So yeah, so I was there for a couple of years and 2.5 years, and it was great. I mean, I had the opportunity to work in a number of incredibly impactful, in my opinion, projects with an incredible team. I mean, the team that the OECD Nuclear Energy Agency has is incredible. And well, I was very lucky to work. I mean, things like, for example, system costs, which is, as you know, they are pioneers. The NEA is pioneer in the work of system cost. So actually be there at the time that they release one of these reports and be able to actually help disseminate all this information and to help educate well, policymakers, decision makers, and the people that are putting together these plans for the energy mix of the future to understand how system costs work and the role of dispatchable technology in that. So yeah, it was quite fascinating.
Pretty amazing. I mean, to me, it's like that type of work, the economics work. It might not be the most interesting to every engineer, but I feel like that is what should be driving the design decisions, the engineering decisions. I mean, at first at like the nuclear design level, but then at the system design level. I mean, at the end of the day, what are we really trying to optimize for? It's for economical power to the people, right? Like that is like our number one goal, is to get people cheap, clean power. And how do you do that unless you have a fundamental understanding of what the actual costs are, not just what you think they are, but what they are from like real data, like sourced around the world, understanding an actual application over many years, like that is the economic input that we need to drive our engineering decisions.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that, the nuclear technology is very good. I mean, we can always make it better. We can always take in all these innovations to improve the technology. And I would say, more importantly, to streamline things, to make things more effective, more cost effective. So, I mean, I think that right now our first priority in the nuclear world is definitely economics. And this work that the OECD, NEA, and others are doing. I mean, I think that the International Energy Agency is doing a great job. The International Atomic Energy Agency is doing a very good job also of putting together these techno-economic studies, so we understand how everything fits together is important. Because one thing that I'm a little bit sick and tired of hearing, everybody tells me about the levelized cost of electricity for this energy source or the other energy source. Nowadays, levelized cost of electricity is no longer sufficient information to be able to compare.
It drives me crazy because it's a misnomer. It says levelized, but it's not really levelized. It's levelized in accordance to like a discount model. It's not levelized in terms of total system benefits across the
Exactly. No, so, and that's exactly why I thought that the work that we did in system cost was so important. I mean, people need to understand that, yes, the cost of each one of the components of the system is important. And obviously the lowest the cost of each component is the better, right? So in that sense, we all have to strive to lower levelized cost. But then you need to look at how all the pieces of the puzzle work together and look at the cost of the system as a whole, and the reliability of the system as a whole, and the resiliency of the system as a cost and as a whole. And all those things cost money. And even though some people may not actually see it in when you see the wholesale of price of electricity, or when you look at say carbon pricing on things like that. So but all those things actually have a cost, and we need to start consider how the system as a whole functions most cost effectively. And of course that this is where nuclear in particular, but in general I would say baseload electricity is indispensable. And of course, if you want to decarbonize, nuclear is what you need to take into account.
Absolutely. Did you find, as you kind of brought this information around the world, that people got it? And I shouldn't say people, I should ask who really understood these arguments around total systems cost, and who didn't understand them? And I don't mean for you to point out specific people, I just mean like generally. Did certain types of governments get it? Did certain types of utilities get it? Did bankers not get it? What was the response?
Well, I think it's a learning process. I mean, I think that the first instinct when you are talking about system costs, people think that you are talking about transmission and distribution, and you are like, yes, okay, that is part of the cost, but that is just a teeny tiny part of the cost. I mean, you really need to consider all these other costs, the balancing cost, the fact that you have all these spinning reserves, the fact that you have to have inertia, the fact that you have to have all these ancillary services. So it takes time. It's not immediately obvious to everybody. But I think that, and you are seeing this more and more, and you are seeing, for example, that even now, the International Energy Agency, they are moving beyond only providing levelized cost of electricity. They are also providing the BAL COE, which is another way to measure system cost. I mean, there are many, there is a couple of different models for that. I love the way we do it at the OECD NEA, which is different the way the REA does it. But again, it's as long as there is a model and a way to account for the overall system stability, system reliability, and system cost, that's what's important.
Yeah. Tell me about your new role. How did they find you first? And what was the call like when they wanted you to come take leadership of the WNA?
Yeah, well, this was quite, I mean, this position was not advertised, of course. So somebody actually reached out to me and they told me, they are looking for a new director general. Agneta is looking to retire. So would you like to consider applying for that role? And then I thought about this, like, okay, well, I think it's a long shot, but sure, definitely. I mean, I'm up for the challenge. Yeah, well, so there were a couple of interviews and several conversations with the board of the association, and they offered me the job, and I couldn't believe it. But here I am.
Everyone else could believe it.
No, I'm so excited because once again, it's a different point of view that when I was at the OECD Nuclear Energy Agency. But once again, I feel that World Nuclear Association is also at a very, very good spot to help broker all these conversations that we need to have, to help on the one hand have some sort of thought leadership when we talk in general about energy, and we look at the decarbonization challenges, the energy supply challenge, the sustainable development challenge. I mean, all those are many challenges that take us in different directions, and to be able to put nuclear at the center of that debate, I think is very, very important. And I'm thrilled that we have the resources and the talent and the expertise here to bring over there the fact and the information. And then on the other hand, another role that I think we have that I think is very important is our working groups. I mean, basically the fact that we work with the industry and we make sure that the industry talks to each other. So try to make sure that we put a joint point of view, that we achieve consensus when there are questions or different points of view, and also try to help the industry get aligned so we can truly deliver on all these promises that we are making, whether it's small modular reactors or affordable nuclear, I mean, even more affordable nuclear energy, or building nuclear power plants faster, all these promises that we are making. We are trying to work together with the industry to make sure that we are actually, as an industry, able to deliver those promises.
And how does that happen? Can you just tell me more like structurally about the organization? Who are members? Do they pay fees? How does it get funded? And what's the organization like overall?
Right. So we have currently about a little more than 180 members. And they are from more than, I think it's 43 countries. And this is all continents. So basically, this is a truly global enterprise. And we represent the entire nuclear fuel cycle, which I think is very, very important. So we have uranium mining companies, conversion, enrichment, fuel fabrication. Of course, we have a number of utilities. I mean, about 70% of the nuclear utilities are represented in the World Nuclear Association. And then we look at the back end of the fuel cycle, whether it is the management of used fuel, the management of nuclear waste, and of course the commissioning. So basically the entire nuclear fuel cycle. Then we also have the majority of the fuel vendors, I mean, the suppliers. I mean, whether you are looking at reactor designers and suppliers, and many of the suppliers from the supply chain. And then we have something that I was not very aware until I came here. All these other, this universe of companies and services that support the nuclear industry that perhaps are not very well known to everybody. So we are looking, like the nuclear insurance, nuclear transportation, nuclear lawyers. There is a lot of engineering and consultants that support all these pieces and parts. So it's quite comprehensive. And yeah, all these companies, they pay fees, and basically that is the number one revenue source that we have to do our work. I mean, that's basically how we do it.
And what is the most common request from the members? What do they want to see your organization accomplish?
Well, so it depends on the time, right? So we have so number one, we have what we call the working groups, where the industry work together. So there are specific items and issues or topics that are of specific interest for the industry at one given time. So like say, for example, let's say long-term operation of lifetime management of nuclear power plants. Clearly, that is a very big issue right now when many companies are looking at extending the life of the current fleet. So this is when all the members, they get together and they explore questions, lessons learned, best practices, who's doing that, who's doing what, how you are facing this issue. So that is one way in which we address the custom, the members' needs. And then other area is more related to bigger picture items that are more, as I said, communications, strategy, thought leadership. So like, for example, we've been working quite a lot on this area of sustainable financing. So obviously, we've been working with our colleagues at Foratom in the context of the European Union sustainable the sustainable financing taxonomy. I know you have talked to this with several other of your interviewees. So we've been following that. So basically, this is a very important issue that even though it is European focus, it is going to have enormous impact at all levels globally.
Tell me more about it. Give our audience a little bit of a brief lesson as to what is taxonomy and how is it going to, what might change, when is it going to change, and how is it going to affect?
Right. Okay, well, so the European Union taxonomy regulation is essentially, the European Union wants to maximize the financing that goes towards sustainable activities, whatever that is. Yeah. So then what they are doing is putting together a classification of all economic activities and trying to determine which classification can be, which economic activity can be considered sustainable and which cannot. Of course, assuming that the ones that are sustainable, they will be suitable or eligible for this financing, and the ones that aren't, no. So they are in the process of creating this classification, and they are putting together all kinds of criteria, technical criteria, in order to say, okay, this or that technology or economic activity could be sustainable if this and that and the other thing can be met. So the problem is that at the very beginning, they decided that nuclear energy, they weren't sure whether it was sustainable. So there was a couple of expert groups that look at nuclear energy within the context of the criteria that they were setting up. So in one group that we were, when I was at NEA, we were working at. So in this working group, they decided that it's undeniable that nuclear energy can contribute to decarbonization, to mitigation and adaptation in the context of climate change. So it is undeniable. So in that sense, great. Now, there was another working group that was looking at the what they call do no significant harm. Essentially, yes, there are positive impacts for nuclear, but are there negative impacts that are intolerable that would preclude us to consider it? So unfortunately, this working group was not very serious. I can tell you because I was there. So this is first-hand information. Yeah. I mean, basically, the people that were in this group, they essentially had a foregone conclusion that nuclear energy was not sustainable because of the radioactive waste.
And this is a group that is formed to combat the climate change challenge, right? It's all about climate change.
It's about sustainable development. I mean, clearly, decarbonization. Yeah, decarbonization is part of that, but of course, it's beyond that, right? So we want to continue developing within decarbonization. Yes.
And so, okay, but these are people who have, in theory, dedicated this part of their career, their lives towards helping others, right? Towards showing achieving these sustainability goals, and they won't even question their foregone assumptions. They won't even look at data. They won't even consider the fact that this miraculous technology that has provided so much and had so little impact over so many years. Like, it's not like this is some theoretical technology. This technology is world electricity, and they won't even give it like a reasonable look.
Yeah, no, no, you're right. I mean, it was, this was quite political. And as I said, this particular working group was not particularly science-based in these conclusions. So the good news about this is they didn't succeed on get nuclear excluded.
Okay.
So they were only able to put nuclear on the line. Basically, we were still on the fence, right? So basically what the European Commission said is like, well, we are going to need another expert group that looks at nuclear very, very carefully, and we will base our decision based on that. So now, more good news. The European Commission asked the Joint Research Center to do that analysis, which they did, and in fact, they just published the report. I think it was in March, so basically a month and a half ago. And in this report, they absolutely unquestionably, they said that after very thorough analysis, and you have to read this report, it's incredible, they have found that nuclear energy has no adverse consequences to the environment of humans any more or less, I mean, certainly no more than any other of the technologies that are being considered. So that is excellent news. So now what is happening is that the European Commission is looking into what is the process by which nuclear energy may be reincorporated into the taxonomy regulation.
And what happens if it is? What literally does that do? Does it open it up to World Bank funding? Does it open, like, what does it do?
Well, so this is obviously a European taxonomy. So it focuses on European funding. So what it means is, number one, very important, nuclear gets labeled sustainable, which is very important because I think that every other financial instruments that people even outside of the European Union are put together will have they will look what the European Union is doing. But what is happening is this. So nuclear energy projects would be eligible for maybe more affordable financing, which is this sustainable financing, green financing, whatever you want to call it. So that is nuclear projects per se. You could have nuclear companies or companies that have nuclear assets included into financial instruments that can be labeled as sustainable. So you know this when you look at your 401k for the American audience, or your retirement for everybody else, and you're trying to invest on that mutual fund. Some people really want to look at sustainable mutual funds, right? So if nuclear is considered sustainable, it would be possible to label it as such and include it into these mutual funds. If not, it would have to be excluded, which is a huge penalty, right? Or things like, I mean, actually the European Commission goes even further, because it's not only it's economic activities and the entire life cycle of the economic activity. So let's say that the economic activity is the manufacturing of aluminum, for example, right? So let's say that you are an aluminum smelter in Finland, and you want to expand your facilities. Well, because a very large percentage of your electricity comes from renewable, sustainable nuclear energy, you might be eligible for sustainable financing for your expansion.
I see. Oh my God. So this is what it really addresses, is the market pull for nuclear. So when all of these other industries, whether it's aluminum or data centers or chemicals or water processing or anything, have to invest in energy infrastructure, and they might be mandated by law to only access sustainable energy resources, otherwise they'll be taxed out the wazoo.
Exactly.
It forces them to either consider nuclear or not consider nuclear in their portfolio of options. And I've always thought that one of the best new markets that nuclear should be going after is directly to industry itself, especially these smaller, the small modular reactors, which might be perfectly suited for it, very complementary to the processes, not just only in electricity production, but in heat production, being available all the time, being co-located. Clean, literally everything.
Exactly. No, but this is why, I mean, the sustainable financing taxonomy in Europe is incredibly important. I mean, and yes, it only applies to Europe, but the reality is that nowadays the markets are absolutely global. So most companies, even they are Canadian companies or Chinese companies or Japanese companies, they are going to want to invest in Europe, or European companies are going to want to invest in Bangladesh. So certainly we saw this as a huge impact, a potential negative impact to the viability
when does
of
this
nuclear.
happen? When is the final ruling made?
So this is still ongoing. So as I just told you, the report from the GRC came out well a couple months ago, a month and a half ago. And currently the European Commission has proposed that they are going to put together what they call a complementary delegated act. This is just the nomenclature that they use in Europe. And this needs to be approved by the European Council and the European Parliament. And then essentially, if all goes well, by the end of 2021, early 2022, all this legislation will be put in place as a law. So,
did we get any, before the end of 2022, did we get any like insight ahead of that, where it's like, you know, the people talk to the people on the commission and ask them who you're going to vote for and that kind of stuff?
No, so this is all going right now. I mean, so obviously the World Nuclear Association, we don't talk directly to member countries, we talk to our member companies, but we certainly are encouraging our member companies to talk to the appropriate people in their countries to make sure that the importance of this legislation is well understood. Because as I say, it's not really just the nuclear industry. I mean, it could be incredibly important to the overall economy of a country. I mean, think a country like France. You know, if nuclear were to be deemed non-sustainable, a lot of industries in France would be penalized, because basically a huge chunk of their energy would be non-sustainable. So yeah.
So how come France doesn't, you know, swing some muscle around? I mean,
oh no, don't worry, France. I mean, don't worry. No, if you can encourage policymakers in France to continue pushing this legislation, please do. But certainly, I think that France is very aware of the importance of this legislation, and they are moving forward on that.
Amazing. You know, we're coming up on our time, but I would love to just, you know, kind of give you some final thoughts, you know, where you see the industry going, you know, why it's important to you, any note that you want to leave on, it's up to you.
Well, so maybe one thing that we touched very briefly just now, but I think is very important, and is this concept that nuclear energy produces electricity and heat with zero carbon. So for some reason, everybody remembers the electricity, which is great, and please don't let them forget it. But I think that the visibility of zero carbon nuclear heat is not quite there. So that's something that we've been working on. I mean, not just us at World Nuclear Association. Clearly, there are many others. But I think it's very important, in particular for policymakers, as we are looking to be serious about these net zero goals and decarbonizing the entire economy. We really need to look at the very important role that zero carbon nuclear heat can make for this. I mean, because, you know, we can help decarbonize many sectors in the industry. We can help decarbonize clearly the heating and cooling for conditioning. I mean, you know, of buildings. We can help decarbonize transportation, perhaps through hydrogen. I mean, beyond electric cars, also fuel cells with hydrogen. And then, of course, we know that hydrogen per se has so many opportunities by itself to be a very good decarbonization vector. So I really think it's very important for the industry to highlight that. I mean, nuclear is electricity and beyond, and there are many things that we can do. So that's one thing. And maybe before we finalize, the one thing that I really would like to highlight is, you know, I think that climate change is to the nuclear industry something similar to COVID has been to the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, it is our opportunity to shine. Yeah. So yes, there are challenges, but with those challenges, there are huge opportunities. And I really, really think that we need to instill this sense of urgency and this can-do attitude. And maybe as an industry, we need to start consider, okay, what can we do differently? Or is there something that we can streamline so we can really, really address the urgency and the enormity of this climate change challenge that we have, and do that while leaving nobody behind? I mean, because I think it's very important to recognize that a lot of the proposals that we see for decarbonization talk about, the pie is of a fixed size, this zero-sum mentality. And I really think that nuclear energy gives policymakers the opportunity to think about, no, this is huge. Everybody can have more because the pie can be much bigger, because we can actually allow everybody to reach the same standard of living and do it without having enormous damage to the planet and the overall system.
Yeah. Sama Bilbao, León, thank you so much for your time today, for everything that you shared with me over the years, for teaching everyone that you have, for contributing to the industry in every way that you have. You're a real gem, and we all can't wait to talk to you again.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Brett. And you know where we are. Anything you need, please don't hesitate. Come and tell us.
And initiate at least a new approach to the many difficult problems that must be solved in both private and public conversation if the world is to shake off the inertia imposed by fear and is to make positive progress toward peace.